Hello, friends. We are in a troubling time when it comes to misinformation. Here at Forbidden Knowledge News, I've always taken an unbiased, open-minded, and responsible approach to presenting my own theories, and the views of our guests do not reflect that of my own. This show is for entertainment purposes only, and any information presented during this show is a live-action role-play scenario. Conspiracies are definitely fun to discuss in a responsible way. All that being said, enjoy this episode. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Brandon Barnett. First, check out Brainsupreme. Brainsupreme does contain the highest quality ingredients, so you can start your microdosing journey guaranteed. Go to brainsupreme.co/discount/FKN15 and you'll get 15% off your entire order. We also have that link for you right in the description. Also, watch the Forbidden documentary, Occult Louisiana, available on Tubi and multiple streaming platforms. A great way to help us finish producing our upcoming film. Also, get a Rokfin premium membership, rokfin.com/FKN+. And always be sure to download our podcast episodes directly through Spreaker. We're booking guests for December and January. If you have suggestions or you'd like to be a guest, email me, forbiddenknowledgenews@gmail.com. Today I want to welcome Brandon Barnett. He's an artist with a career spanning over 25 years. He recently launched a marketing firm, and he is currently creating amazing works of art that can be seen at Soldier Media on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. As a child, he was part of the Gate and Pace gifted programs. Today he is here to share his experiences that he was subjected to through hidden special access recruitment operations. Brandon, welcome. How you doing?
I'm great this morning. Thanks for having me on, Chris.
Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. You've got some very interesting testimony to share with us today. And doing the show, I've spoken with many that claim to have been a part of some kind of CIA or Black Ops Special Access programs, everything from mind control experiments to even assassin creation, secret space program. I've never spoken with anyone who's been a part of these gifted programs that can actually recall some of the traumatic events that they have been through. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing your story and sharing this. This is a very important topic, especially if these kinds of things are still occurring. Before we get into this is your first time on, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your work.
Yeah, so I've been a professional artist for 27 years. I got an early start right out of high school. I pitched a product, and the company in the pitch meeting said, "Do you just want a job here?" So I've been in product development for a little over 25 years. It's been a passion of mine. I went to art school for it. I had a marketing firm for 10 years recently. I just closed a couple of years ago. And I think that actually ties into my story. In fact, I think my whole career does. So I started my career in the exports industry, and I think that's going to be relevant in our conversation. And I would like to preface by saying that what's going on here is something that's new to me. So I am not somebody that made a claim that I was part of the GATE programs. I do have receipts for you, by the way, so we'll see some things in writing. I'm not on a speaking tour. I'm not part of the UFO community. This is a genuine journey for me that began when I saw Joe Rogan say GATE program on TV. I was like, what in hey, that was my school program. So this started for me when him and Duncan Trussell did an episode together and talked about the GATE program. And I started realizing my career tied into it. So I'm hoping you and I have a very eye-opening conversation here, and I might get some good feedback from you, some additional information that you would already have from people that you've spoken to in the community. And I'm hoping that I get some answers today.
Right on, man. Well, like I said, looking forward to getting into this. Tell us, as far as you know, how did this all start for you?
So I have kind of an interesting life path, and I'm not saying that like I'm cool. I've had to sort of analyze it under a microscope lately. So where this began would probably be Alaska. It ties into my story that I was born in Fairbanks in 1979. Pardon me. During a total eclipse. And so you can look that up, the 1979 solar eclipse. It's well documented. It just happened again in 2017. And the reason I bring that up is it turns out that part of this GATE program began out of Alaska in the 70s. For me, it began in kindergarten. So when I said interesting life story, I hope it's not too tragic for people to be interested in. But part of my story is that my mom and dad met on the Alaska pipeline. My mom's first husband was a race car driver, so she knew how to drive trucks. She was up there making money on a CDL as a truck driver, met my dad, who was a foreman, and I was born in Fairbanks. But the reason that it matters is she left when I was 1 without telling my dad, moved to Southern California to a bad neighborhood, and said, if you want to see your son, you have to come here. So for me, I ended up in a Montessori school in kindergarten. It was called McKinley School, which is also relevant to the story, in my opinion.
Now, for those that aren't familiar, what's a Montessori school?
A Montessori school would be like a preschool and kindergarten that maybe your parents pay for, maybe is just offered in an area, but it's, to put it lightly, it's just sort of an upgraded experience. They pay a little more attention to the kids. It's a little more interactive. We had maybe better classrooms. So it's kind of like private school, I guess, because the parents might pay. And so I was tested in kindergarten. I got transferred to a special room in kindergarten. I have the receipt for that. And they said that they were starting a new class in kindergarten. So they wanted me to be in this special classroom. And when I was in it, I kept getting in trouble because I could read in kindergarten. And I kept reading a book called Corduroy. It's about a teddy bear that loses his button.
Now, they tested you before they put you into this special class?
I don't remember being tested in preschool. I don't know if it's teacher observation based, but in kindergarten, I was tested. And I actually still have the paperwork that says we'd like to offer the opportunity to place your student in a special program starting in first grade. And in Southern California, that wasn't called GATE. GATE was once you got into 5th grade, I believe. So it started as the TAP program, TAP. And it's interesting because if you try to look that up now, that's the same acronym for school financing. So the program's kind of buried, but I have all my paperwork, believe it or not, from when I was in school. So it started as TAP. I was in TAP 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade at a school called Longfellow. 5th grade, still at Longfellow, it began as GATE program. And then I went to Hughes Middle School, which is in Long Beach, also connected to Longfellow Elementary. We had an advanced program there. It was GATE. And then when we went on to high school, I went to Long Beach Poly, and I did 2 more years in what would be this GATE program through my sophomore year. And then because of the program, because of how we accrued credits, we were allowed to start taking AP courses for college our junior and definitely senior year. So it started for me literally in kindergarten. My first year in the program was 1st grade, and I was in it for 10 consecutive.
Now, on the surface, these programs are just supposed to be for children with advanced learning abilities, cognitive abilities, and it's supposed to give them a leg up in certain opportunities on the surface, right?
Yeah, I mean, so GATE stands for Gifted and Talented Education. And yeah, we had Bunsen burners when other kids weren't allowed to have that stuff. We had special classrooms. I would say the most prevalent place to see that functionally was in high school. I'm at Long Beach Poly, which is in a pretty bad neighborhood, has 4,000 students. I remember that there were only 225 of us in this program. We had our own buildings, so we weren't general pop, if you will.
Did you always think that there was something strange about the program, or did you not really have any memories until later? How did you start, besides seeing Joe Rogan mention this, what really started to make you question things?
Okay. So when I closed my marketing firm, I took 25 years experience in Photoshop and Illustrator and being a punk rock artist. And I took that energy and I took this free time I had and I started making personal art for the first time since probably art school. When I did it, I started having an experience that was definitely unfamiliar and uncomfortable to me. And that experience was that I would go to make an ornate piece of art and I would make 10 of them. And I would look at the clock and say, that's not possible. I've been an art director for half of my life. I've been very serious, dedicated digital artist for over half of my life. And I would look at this amount of work and say, this isn't possible. And I noticed it was kind of an out of body experience. And it continued down a path where that started getting more intense to the point that when I sat on my computer, I would go to do things I wanted to do inside my Photoshop program, my Illustrator program, trying to achieve this art. And it was almost like my computer or my mouse or a force was fighting me. And one day I jokingly said, do whatever you want. And I'm not a Ouija board kind of guy, but I watched that mouse move around on the screen a little bit and it freaked me out. And a few months later, to directly answer your question, I had a vision, and I am not a person that has visions. I am not prone to such things. And to make it more meaningful, it was witnessed by a person watching it happen to me that I was describing everything I was seeing to. And after that, I started analyzing my life under a microscope in a way I never had and looking into my past for what might connect to this. And it was days later that the GATE program started popping up all over the internet, and it did mildly trigger something in me, and I started having flashbacks of interesting times.
To the best of your ability, tell us some of the memories that started coming up.
I definitely will. Do you mind if we start with the list of
yeah, man,
ways
wherever you want to go with it.
I say it that way because, see, this isn't something that I define myself by. I'm now fresh on this, trying to find out how much of GATE defines who I am, and I don't know it. And so I don't mean to lead the conversation, but what I'd like to start with, that list of parameters for who you had to be in the program. Have you seen this online?
I have not.
Okay, so there was a specific list of parameters that somebody posted online that said, if you were in these programs, here's who you were. And then they were all posing the question, how many of these fit you if you were in the program? Okay, so I have the actual list and I could pull it up. Anybody can find it. It's prevalent out there. But here are the ones that hit me, and it's almost the entire list. Birth complication, traumatic childhood physical abuse, 98th percentile in test scores. I actually have the receipts. IQ over 130, near-death experience, particularly around water. And then here's the one that honestly changed my thinking. This is the one that just blew my mind. Is if you go back and read the documents for the doctor that formed the beginnings of the Gateway program for the government, this GATE program, This guy actually mentions two things that freaked me out. In the 70s, he wrote that these kids were going to have to be on computers and they would be meme wizards. And while the first hand-drawn meme was in like the 1920s, they didn't hit computers till 2000. This document was written in the 70s by my understanding. And if I remember correctly, it's on CIA.gov. I'll even try and give you a link or a copy of it. But if that was written back then and they knew that, that'd be one thing. But he mentions in the preliminary documentation for the program that these people were actually tested, the same group of gifted they're looking for, back in the 60s. So his program was standing on the shoulders of someone. And he mentioned that they from the 60s were monitored their whole lives. And here's what I was leading up to, is on that list of parameters, it said that the people in the program, the males, would at some point in their college years date a Jewish art student, have a girlfriend that is a Jewish art student.
That's pretty specific, man.
It's pretty specific if you're writing this ahead of time. And when I first heard it, I went, oh, weird, that doesn't fit the list. And then I realized I read it wrong. It doesn't say that she would be in art school with me. It doesn't say that she would be at a Jewish school and be an art. It said that she would be Jewish and an art school student. The woman that I married, my first wife, she was Jewish. I celebrated with her family. I learned the traditions, and she went to FIDM, School of Art and Design, out of LA. Shit. It's the big one. Wow. What are the fucking chances? And Chris, I had to ask myself, bro, in real life, I had to ask, is my life scripted?
So you mentioned something interesting, and I was speaking with a guest the other day. It wasn't about anything having to do with this, but he had mentioned that he was born in the caul, which means he was born in the amniotic sac, and now he supposedly has strong psychic abilities and is able to channel and all these things. And there seems to be a direct link to childhood traumatic experiences and something these people are looking for. Something, maybe it changes your perception, maybe it activates something differently in your mind, but they seem to have a strong interest in, like you were saying, people's near-death experiences, traumatic births. It's very interesting.
Well, so I didn't mean to deflect your question. Let me come back to it. You asked me what I was remembering, and I had to preface with what I did because that was the start of the journey of what I was remembering. I want to clarify for the audience that the GATE program hasn't been a big deal to me this whole time. I thought it was weird. I've got some weird receipts I keep talking about. I can't wait to do show and tell with you. But the reality is that this wasn't defining me. It wasn't something I thought about. And then all of a sudden, I started remembering things with great clarity that caused me to question. So let me go in order. Traumatic birth. It wasn't traumatic to me, obviously. I don't remember that part, but my dad always joked about an argument with the doctor because I was in there wrong and they had to pull me out with forceps, and he was arguing with the doctor about it. If you look into it, because I've done therapy several times in my life, I currently am in therapy, and not because I'm a broken person, but because on this mental health journey and remembering these things, I wanted some guidance with how to evaluate them. And apparently that stress right at the moment of birth can actually change somebody. So when I was in third grade, I was already in these advanced classes, and there was a group of cool kids, and I was friends with them at school. But outside of school, I lived in a really poor neighborhood of Long Beach. The moms didn't like coming there. They didn't get along with my parents. So it was awkward for me. But I got to go to the beach with these guys. They were very cool to me. We listened to some Weird Al Yankovic because it was third grade and we're having a great day. But then I wasn't given fins or a leash or a boogie board. I was given a half a broken bodyboard with no exterior. So we're talking a piece of bodyboard shaped foam. I got caught in a riptide and sucked so far away. I didn't know which direction to walk back. I was panicked. I was a little kid. I had no wherewithal. I'm just panicked all the way through the experience. And then I get yelled at by a mom who was like, "Where did you go?" It was traumatic to me at the time. here's where it's interesting, because I'm not a person that just wants to air out my traumas online. That's not part of my journey. But it said in that documentation who they were looking for, what they wanted to find in these people, and I'll share that in a moment. But it specifically said that it became more prevalent through trauma, because when the children were abused, when they were panicked, when they were cornered, and I've read this document several times, it says if they have the ability to do something, it will often manifest out of necessity. I didn't have anything like that happen to me when I was a little kid. But what I did have is somebody break into my parents' room at my first house when I was 5 years old. I witnessed the entire thing. This person made eye contact with me. The crazy part is they only went in my bedroom. Then they went back out the window that they came in, and they didn't steal anything. Police came. There was a report. I mean, this was a real life incident, not a dream. My family talked about it. Yeah. That continued throughout my life.
Wow.
And when I started remembering things, I realized there was a second time, and then a third, that maybe this same looking gentleman broke into where I was living. And these are 3 separate domiciles.
No shit.
So I had never connected these things in my head, because let's be honest, life is fast paced. We got things to do. I was running a marketing
Honestly,
firm.
bro, I don't remember.
Around.
I'd say 80% of my childhood. I couldn't tell if it's trauma or what. I think I had a pretty decent childhood, but even I can't remember shit. So I get it, man. It's tough to recall a lot of that.
Well, so I have this really meaningful career. I've been very successful at it. And then in looking at this whole situation, I have to look at, well, where did my group of friends go? Where did my stand by me pals go after high school, right? We all got off the school bus together. We spent our whole childhoods together. We grew up on the block together. But as adults, you fall out of touch. I'm 45. Things happen. I was an asshole in my 20s. People don't talk, life. So I look at where did these people go as I start digging into this. And I was a skateboard rat. I was a surfer. I got off the school bus with 5 guys, and everybody but me went high-end military.
Is there anyone in your family or even distant family members that may be higher level military or involved with the military in some way?
My sister's first husband, who I don't remember, he was one of those guys with a lot of colorful Boy Scout patches on his jacket, I don't know exactly what he did. That would be one of my only connections to it.
Right on.
But here's where it gets interesting. So I get off a bus in skate clothes with a ratty backpack listening to 9 Inch Nails like everybody else that's 16. But let me describe to you that the guys I hung out with built RC cars with me, skateboarded with me. We rode bikes together. We shot fireworks at each other and swam in a pool. We surfed together. These were normal people. One of them is currently working at West Point after having attended West Point. One of them hosted the UFC with Joe Rogan and traveled the world learning every martial arts style. One of them had a 155 IQ. One of these guys is currently in Czech Republic doing something I can't know about. One of the guys that I grew up with from my block, he had a job right out of high school making 60 grand a year when minimum wage was like $5.75 or $7, and he couldn't talk about it. He had clearance. What are the chances that I just go to high school and that's the 5 guys I hang out with? Because it doesn't stop there. I had a roommate that was one of those guys got off the bus with me. He ended up being a door kicking operator. And then because you brought up the military connection, I'll keep going, because once I had to look backwards in my life, here's what I realized. The only girl I dated in college, her dad was so high up in the military, he had a sword hanging over his fireplace with a display of his awards. He was some kind of general. We dated. That was the only girl I dated in college. When I turned 40 and decided that pharmaceuticals were poisoning everybody was the first time I started smoking pot. It turned out the first guy I was buying weed from was a door kicking operator. The girl that I've been dating for 5 years, both her parents were in the CIA and they just moved here. And the guy that got me into church, who was my AA sponsor and mentor, was also an operator. I had to ask a counselor, what percentage of the military goes to West Point, teaches at West Point, actually kicks doors? She said maybe 20. And I said, out of my limited world, since I'm an introvert, what are the chances that many military and CIA are around me? And she goes, well, mathematically, like 0.
Yeah. Wow, man.
So I'm not saying that any of those people are spooky. I'm not saying any of those people were in on some inside joke. But I think when we finish talking, you'll see why I, at least as a reasoning adult, had to question it a little bit.
Yeah. There are a lot of these things that people like yourself who have been involved with a lot of these programs tend to have people placed in their lives, to maybe handlers. Maybe these people aren't even aware of what they're doing, but for some reason or another, they become close in your lives, and it in some ways have an effect on you. And it's very synchronistic and very strange at times to see that. Going back to the actual programs, were you able to recall memories from anything that was occurring there?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I saw in the videos I watched about the GATE program that I considered minor at the time, but I'm reconsidering, is that there were at least a couple of times in the program that we were given a big cup of pink fluoride. And the reason I find that interesting is that we now know through people like Grant Hancock and science that if you consume the right type of fluoride, it calcifies the pineal gland. And the pineal gland has to do with the way we connect out of body, astral projection. It's been looked at in scientific studies. And of course, going back to the Egyptians, they believe that that was probably the eye of Horus, and it contains DMT and has to do with our innate functionality with astral projection. I'll give you some more memories, but let me just preface all of these because I think it ties into the memories and the military connection. That in the documentation I've read, it said that what they were looking for was kids that had the innate ability to astral project, because the technology that they had encountered didn't have controls and buttons and dials like F-16s. And it had to be operated telepathically, if you will, like through an astral projection. And military guys weren't trained for that. So they took F-16 and F-35 pilots, whatever the case was then. And when they put these guys in there, this is their documents, not my opinion. I'm not Alex Jones, even though I love the guy. They were looking for people whose minds could interact with it and not have the outcome the pilots had. They were rigid thinking, robotic people flying these jets, and it caused them mental distress to a level they couldn't handle piloting this maybe otherworldly, maybe UFO, maybe advanced technology. And it sounds to me like it's either recovered technology or technology we bartered for, because why would we build something that we couldn't pilot?
Yeah.
So they were looking for people that had these abilities. Why give those people fluoride? Well, maybe it ties into another memory. Maybe they had already identified who could potentially pilot these things, who potentially had telekinetic abilities. And maybe they wanted everybody else to not be competition, not be a problem, and not figure it out later. If we know fluoride is so bad that right now today, they're making it illegal in water supplies. The first time it was used in water supplies was in Nazi camps. We know it pacifies people. Why give it to the bright kids you're testing? Well, one of the memories, and I even saw pictures of it online, is they used to make us listen in sound labs, off-site, maybe even off-campus sound labs. And it was audio testing. It was specific tapes. It had specific images on the cases to these big 8-track tapes. They had us listen for tones, and people that weren't our teachers would have us identify what tones we could hear. And then they played these repetitious things to us. And to this day, I hear one of those tones. I heard it yesterday. I've heard it my whole life.
Did they tell you that it was fluoride that they were giving you?
Yeah. Yeah, it was under the guise, or it could have literally just been, let's educate you on how to take care of your teeth. Somebody came in and gave out samples. You got a free toothbrush that was a dinosaur. But they started doing this in my kindergarten class. We did it in first grade, second grade, third grade, I believe even fourth. How many years does it take to learn to brush your teeth? I don't know. But we had to take this pink drink. And if you look at what people have posted online, the folks claiming to remember things from Gate, they keep talking about pink drink. And I remember it.
Could it be possible that it may have been some other substance, maybe an entheogen, or maybe some of it was fluoride, some of it a placebo, just to see the effects that it may be? I don't know.
Well, let's go deep on it. Pardon me. I never suggested to any of my friends that I was ever in a CIA program. I never thought of it that way. But when I read the documentation, it's pretty clear that under the umbrella of MK Ultra, for national security reasons, they wanted to manage intelligence assets, and they considered high intellect, high test result driven people to be part of national security. So these programs were started to identify those folks. If we could talk for a second about a memory, I think it ties it all together.
Yeah.
So let's go deep for a minute, because I think this explains the drink. In the documentation I've read recently, it connects to this memory because it says in MK Ultra, but it says specifically in this program, some of the kids could be exposed to, say, LSD. It lists other things, and I'm sure they have other things. But we know factually now, through Freedom of Information Act, Congress has discussed, MK Ultra was, of course, real. No one disputes it. And they did test using LSD. One of my strongest memories in life, and to answer your question, from those times, I have a repeating dream. And you have to wonder if they couldn't give kids at school a delay reaction substance that affects you in your sleep, that affects you later that night. And who would believe a kid? Kids see weird things, talk to imaginary friends. They have weird dreams. So you go to sleep, you wake up screaming, your parents tell you to go back to bed. So the actual memory that I have is the only repeating dream that I've ever had in my life. And I'm literally starting to question whether it was a dream. So that first house where someone broke in, I'm laying in my bed, it's first grade. All of a sudden, I'm called outside. I go out my front door, I turn left, and I look over my neighbor's house. And the first thing I notice is it's completely hush. There's no people, there's no wind, nothing's moving, there's not a cat walking by. It's still. And there's like an artificial light source above me. And then I look across my neighbor's roof and I see what I could only call a UFO. A pretty clear, classic kind of UFO, a big one. The next thing I know, I'm on it. Now, I'm not a person that goes around claiming to be abducted. This is something I've been reanalyzing now, but this is the only repeating dream I've ever had in my life, and I had it a lot of times. And it was something I told my girlfriend about. I just didn't think about it in this paradigm. But so now I'm on this ship, and I'm in a big room, and there are 3 frogs wearing what I would call robes. And they hand me about a foot-tall brass ring with 3 cubes
Hold on,
on
did
it.
you just say frogs in robes? Now, this is crazy, dude. I don't know if you've ever heard my story about my first contact experience through meditation.
No, sir.
Sure.
Can I hear it?
Well, it was the first time that I had ever experienced anything that you might consider paranormal at all. Meditative experience. It's a long story, so I'll make it short. I made contact. Something started speaking through my mind, and I now have an understanding that it's possibly my higher self that was speaking to me. But what happened was, this experience led to this career, actually. It really changed my whole life. It was a couple-hour conversation with this thing, and it really was trying to get the message out that I needed to heal childhood trauma, quit my job that was toxic, and start this career. And it was very strange that this voice would have so much interest, but I have a better understanding of now what it is I believe. But the next day, or it was 2 days later, I wanted to have this experience again because I didn't really totally believe it. I thought maybe, what, an acid flashback? I'm going crazy. I don't know. So I went and I tried the meditation again. This time, something intuitively told me to get in the water. I do. And this experience was so much more powerful. During the conversation with this voice, something kind of took over my perception, and when I opened my eyes, I could still see my bathroom, everything, but when I closed my eyes, I was on a craft. And then these beings started to appear, and they were all wearing robes. They were kind of translucent. They looked, you could almost see through these beings, and there were about 2 or 3 of them that were frogs in fucking robes, dude. And they spoke to me and had a conversation. But when you said that, I was like, what? That's the only other time I've heard someone say they met a frog entity in a robe. So that's pretty crazy, man.
That is wild.
Yeah.
See, this is why I'm doing this. This wasn't about me. I'm not chasing any kind of clout online. I have become a genuine seeker in my life. But when this occurred, I hit the turbo button. I'm looking hard. So thank you for sharing that, man, brother. Really.
Yeah, for sure. So continue. What were the frogs communicating, or what happened with this experience?
Yeah, so they don't speak in words. I hear
that's how it was
in my mind.
Instant, like almost seamless communication. Before you could finish, the answer would come in.
Just another track in the audio in your mind, and you're almost remembering it because it was just said, and you're so startled it was said in your mind. You're almost remembering what they said, not hearing it. The hairs on the back of your neck, if they can occur in this situation, are standing up. And so these things don't hand me anything. I'm just suddenly holding a foot-tall brass ring with 3 cubes on it, and I've looked my whole life at what these symbols all over these cubes, they were covered in symbols. What are these? I've looked my whole life because it was such a stark dream. It was so vivid to me. I could see it covered in symbols. And at one point in my life, I saw the movie Super 8 by Spielberg. And I nudged my girlfriend at the time and said, oh, that's like those cubes from my dream. You know, they had a train car full of alien cubes. I went, yeah, that's like the ones from my dream. So these frogs in robes make this ring appear in my hand, and it has 3 of these cubes on it. And they say in my mind, don't touch them or you'll be like them. And what they were saying, and I can only tell you I got this without hearing anything, was move the cubes, make them move on the ring. But like, you can't use your hands. They're saying don't touch them to move them or you'll be like them. And I have no idea who them is, but I panic. And I turn my hand, and one of the cubes just swings and bumps my hand. The next thing, I'm off that ship. I'm in a lawn chair I don't own in my front yard. And where that cube bumped me, my arm is increasingly turning green, like Neo in the Matrix, but instead of silver, it's turning green and running up my arm. And then I wake up in my bed.
Wow. Now,
I had that dream 50 times.
Was there anything specifically that you could point out that's different about this dream than other dreams? Many people will have these experiences, will say that it wasn't necessarily dream-like. There was some other sense of reality to it.
I have looked heavily into the Gateway program, and for clarification's sake, that's through the Monroe Institute. That fueled the CIA Gateway program. We can talk about that in a moment if you want, but this is stuff people can look up so they don't have to believe me. And I like being in that position when we're trying to divulge truth, right? And so the Gateway process had to do with astral projection. And I now believe that what was being done was, I wasn't abducted. I was never on a spaceship. This was a construct. This was an injected construct. I think that I was forced to astral project, and that is the location I was taken to. But I wasn't taken anywhere. My physical body never went anywhere, but I no longer believe that was a dream. I believe I was tested repeatedly. And it kind of freaks me out to say that because I didn't grow up on tarot cards. This is kind of crawling up the back of my neck as I learn it. those hairs are standing up. But I do believe that now. As a reasoning adult, I believe that I was forced to astral project and I was tested repeatedly for telekinesis. And that theory would sound insane until you read the actual documentation by the doctor that began the program that said they needed to pilot technology that had to be interacted with on an out-of-body level.
Now, this is going to bring us deep, deep into the woo-woo waters here. I've had quite a few guests that have claimed to have been part of this secret space program, basically. And what these people claim that they are being taken off planet physically, and they're having these battles with aliens. They're doing all of these operations for whatever black project, special access program that they're working for. It is speculated, and I've had plenty of people recently that have come on and talked about the possibility of just what you said. There could be either running simulations on these people through altered states, different types of entheogens or technology, or they could be forcing an out-of-body experience, astral projection, and what they're experiencing is different layers of reality where life forms and intelligences can actually interact with them. And I lean towards that because I do believe that outside of our perception, there's an ecosystem of life forms and intelligences that can interact with us. And it's possible that what's happening here is these people are being groomed and trained to be able to essentially carry out missions in these different realms, which is totally sci-fi insane, but I think it's a huge possibility.
Do you believe in Inception?
Yeah,
just like
man.
the movie that an idea could be implanted in your mind? Okay. I promised you a fun conversation. Are you ready to go deep, get spooky as hell, and even talk Marvel movies? Man. Okay. So let me, to be respectful to you, say I apologize for the smoking. This topic actually gives me jitters.
It's all good.
Thank you for letting me be casual. It makes me nervous because I get these little flashes in my mind that I'll clarify in a moment. But okay, so I see 3 cubes on a ring I'm supposed to move with my mind. The Air Force has a program running to find telekinetic people that can interact with technology. Well, what type of technology? Why cubes? Let's fast forward to we're Generation X. This is the X-Men era. We all grew up on X-Men movies. I have an X tattooed on my arm very clearly. Yeah. It's in my family heraldry, and that's going to become relevant in a moment. And so I start watching Marvel movies, and they have tesseracts, and they're these little glowing cubes. And then it turns out there's more of them. And what are they doing with them? They're opening gateways, and things are coming through the gateways. So then I watch DC movies. Well, let me see. If you're competing against the biggest franchise in history, are you going to try and steal their storyline? Of course not. Like, you're going to do something competitive. There's so much material for DC. But what do they write about? 3 cubes, the mother boxes that open gateways. And so now we've got the gateway process, which ended up being the CIA program for 20 years. The movie Men as Stare at Goats is based on it. It's all factual. The guys are still alive. They've all come forward and spoken. NDAs ran out. So this is clearly happening. Now you've got gateways opening up. We have art pieces popping up on Earth that are gateways. I was in the GATE program. It all starts to tie together. And I used to think it was what we all see on TikTok, that the world's run by Satanists and they think they have to divulge their plans ahead of time. So if you do nothing to stop it, you deserve what you get. I don't really believe that. I think that there's a good guy team, and they're using mass media to try and divulge truth and warn people.
This is something that I love discussing and considering, the possibility that there is some other force at play that is essentially leading humanity in a certain direction through symbolism, certain types of media, and even certain people who are in positions of power that are playing certain roles. And I even go as far as to think maybe these people aren't even aware that they're playing a certain role, but the way things occur, there's a greater force that is pulling strings that may be causing us to become aware and move in a certain direction.
Yeah, I think if we know anything from a metaphysical level to a raw science level, facts that no one argues about in the mainstream, everything has two polarities, always. Everything around us is magnetism. Everything we are, every piece of matter is a vibrating frequency with an electromagnetic field. The earth is a toroidal field, has one around it. Our atmosphere, if you believe in it, is a toroidal field. So if everything has two poles, isn't there always the light and dark struggle? I would think that there's always two competing teams, even if it's just mafias. There's always somebody that's got it and somebody else that makes room to take some, and they tend to compete over time. I have to at least consider, with all the information going around today, that there is some kind of mass awakening happening, like how a slime mold learns, and our organism on a physical scientific level is adding information to the place we all draw it from. I believe in the Akashic record or source or whatever people want to call it. And there certainly seems to be a suppression of information all over our physical earth. Why would you ever want to suppress your populace? Why don't you want the most functional, adept, bright, healthy people possible? Well, you don't want slaves like that. And so if we go back to base philosophy, I think the oldest philosophers have always argued to themselves and amongst each other, is this existence a school or a prison? So now I have to consider, even based in root philosophy, the basics, are we really here as this beautiful, unique being? Or does everything on this planet harm us, including spiders and snakes and bears and our own sun, and we don't have any claws? Could this be more like a labor camp? And then I thought, well, that's silly because the world belongs to us. But then I was shown something very clearly after having heard it on a podcast. We just had Elon Musk fly planes and give cell phones to an uncontacted tribe. Yeah? Okay, so we think that this earth is our domicile, except out of the whole earth, only 30% of it is populatable land. Not all of that's actually inhabitable, so we live on a very small percentage of that. And then within that area, we live almost exclusively, half now, in these tight little pockets called major cities. And on that same limited plane, somehow you have a guy getting on a private jet to have a custom cooked meal by a chef, using invisible waves to contact people all over the planet, and then get off that jet to get in $1 million automobile. And across this tiny little region we populate is literally a guy in like a loincloth shooting arrows. And so I say that because could the other 70% of Earth that we have nothing to do with, essentially, our oceans, could they be populated by things? I don't see why not.
There is this emerging consensus that for centuries humanity has been subjected to a rulership by anti-human, at least, people, or maybe not people, but this rulership that keeps us under control with anti-human ideologies, war, illness, all the things that we struggle against right now. We have this group of people that have basically enslaved humanity for centuries. I've been speaking with many psychics, intuitives, channelers. You can say what you want about a lot of these people. I do believe there's a lot of frauds and scammers out there, but I think there's people who have genuine connections. But it's very strange, the overwhelming consensus that has come out of the psychic community and people who are genuinely tapping into something, that we are reaching a time period where whatever this dark force is that had control over humanity for centuries is coming to an end. And that's what this awakening and waves of awareness crossing the planet really is humanity is breaking out of this matrix system that we've been subjected to. And what we're being presented right now is different polarities. In a sense, it's a test to see what we gravitate towards. If we're going to adopt the anti-human, pedophilic, satanic ideologies, or if we're going to reject those things. I'm very optimistic to see that it seems like there's more people rejecting those things these days than embracing them.
I agree with you. And let me ask, how are we on time?
We got about, I usually go 60 to 90 minutes, but yeah, you got about 30, 40 minutes if you need it.
Epic. I'll get right to the points then. So, to respond to what you just said, I'm in full agreement with you. And I think that it's as simple as this. I've noticed lately the behavior of people. I think that lockdown showed us a lot of that. And I'm not about to make a political statement. I'm talking about people's attitudes. So let me give it to you like this. I'm 40 years old. I'm 60 pounds overweight. My body's falling apart. I'm having surgeries. And I figure out I have to do something to get back on track. I was always an athlete. I have to reclaim my health. They had given me so many diagnoses. I had been through 15 medications and it was destroying my body. So when I start looking at how the world works, everything here holds us down. And the only reason that it happens, the only reason the IRS puts its foot on our neck and pharmaceuticals can poison people their whole lives is because we allow it. Because 8 billion people don't say, hey, time out, we're all done with that. And so what I'm seeing through the use of technology is that we're all communicating with each other on a very different level. It's rapid fire. It's immediate information. It's 15-second clips straight to the facts. And through watching scientists run tests with slime mold, and from watching scientists run tests with rats separated by continents, we know scientifically that an organism has a mass consciousness, that when a rat learns to do something in a maze in America, that now the ones in England can do so. And when a slime mold learns something and you cut a piece of that slime mold out and drop it in an unrelated, separately grown slime mold, it now knows that trick. It knows that path. So where is the information stored? They say this is a simulation all the time. I believe in source. You could call it God if you want. But even for a simulation to run, there has to be a memory of it, and there has to be a hard drive, if you will. So I believe that as more people ask questions and have thoughts, we repeat that onto the Akashic record, onto the hard drive, and it adds up to a polarity in mass consciousness. And here's the simple example. When I turned 40 and I got back on self-improvement, doing push-ups, my nutrition, getting off the food supply, filtering my water, meditating, push-ups daily, yoga. This is my one bad vice, cigarettes. And I started that when World War III was declared. But my point is that when I started getting my energy up, maybe people picture Kundalini energy or chi, or the way that they show in meditation how you can actually move up in your chakras. It's this simple. When I was in a terrible mood and bad things were happening, I repelled people. No one wants to be around you like that. But man, when I was laughing and smiling and having a good time and asking people how their day was, they were magnetically drawn to you. And I think that we as a human do that overall. If you're walking around a little ball of everything's wrong, you're sort of repelling people energetically. It's a magnetism. I believe that what you stated is in this time, people are choosing a higher voltage, plus sign, positive polarity, and that's the shift.
Yeah, I think our reality is formed by our perspective and our collective perspective. And I like what you said about the hard drive, and I do believe in source as well. And I would put it even this way, that there is a central intelligence, and we're all pieces of that central intelligence that observe and absorb information, but we also have a free will to choose what we're going to be interacting with. And that's how this central intelligence learns. And as we are presented these different polarities, we can decide what we want to align with. it seems like progressively we are choosing to align with the good, with the light. It may have taken some time, but I do see things overall getting better for humanity. I think it's a very important time that we're in overall as well. Now, I wanted to go back to your experiences for a minute, and you said that you had some career highs that may be tied into everything.
Yeah, so this isn't bragging. I'm really grateful for my career. But there were a few moments in my life where it felt like doors were held open for me. And I wouldn't talk about it as though I've been blessed, as though they were guiding it for my success. And I'm not a wealthy guy. I'm just a regular graphic designer, man. That's what I do, is marketing. But I come up with an idea, and it was the first time I remember the idea just sort of being handed to my brain. I'm 17 years old, and I invent a dual viscosity skate wax. I drive my dad crazy, ruining the kitchen, melting crayons and canning wax and coming up with a formula. I talk to manufacturers, distributors. When I turn 18, thinking they'll take me seriously at that age, I go to the biggest skate distribution. It's in Southern California. I pitch my product, and they say, "Do you want a job here?" Now I'm working with OGO bags. I have my own backpack line. Now I'm redesigning big lines in this skate industry. I'm up the street from World Industries, which are some of my heroes. I'm in iconic Huntington Beach. I'm selling products all over the world, protective gear, my own line of gloves and helmets. It's like the doors were held open. So then I go to art school. I get a call. "Are you still doing what you do?" My ex-boss became a Hollywood movie producer. He brings me out to his new movie studio. He sets me up with an investor, and I have a clothing line come out. And it made it all the way to mannequins in Pacific Sunwear. My friends are taking pictures of your clothing lines in the mall. There were these crazy career highs, but that's not what it said in the paperwork. The reason I was looking at those is it talked in the paperwork about these people, meaning me, having to be subjected to lifelong traumas. And every one of those opportunities, including I stood in the boardroom at Hasbro and pitched a game 15 years ago that's now a major part of the gaming community. Every one of those was taken away from me. Everything I ever built got stripped away. You could say that's any entrepreneur, but there were enough unexplainable tragedies that came out of the blue that I have to wonder, after everything I've read, like that they could map out a very specific person you date in college. Is the idea of inception possible? And is part of my life scripted? Because you said activated earlier, and in that paperwork, it said they were going to identify and manage intelligence assets to be activated later when this technology was needed for defense.
You believe it could be possible that there are different intelligence factions that have different objectives, possibly good and bad. Some of these are grooming children to be possibly working for the dark side, for dark intelligence operations, but there's also this other side that may be targeting children, but to essentially place them in positions that could make change for the better.
Yeah, so let's talk about the UFO conference in front of Congress yesterday, and I'll wrap this in 1 minute. So we now have whistleblowers saying that Roswell was actually factually true, that we recovered a craft, that we then engineered some type of technology that can knock unidentified craft out of the air, that we have several of these, and that we have learned something from the technology, and the government has spent billions of dollars on it and covered it all up. This is now coming out in front of Congress. It's on MSNBC yesterday morning. I mean, this is happening in our real lives. The government has downed craft nobody on this planet we're aware of built. Here's what I think happened. We start downing craft, and eventually somebody shows up and says, "I want that back."
Yeah.
Right? Hey, maybe I want my friend back. Maybe they're claiming they have bodies, right? I want this person back. We recover ours. Why wouldn't more advanced people? So I want this guy back. So now they're communicating. We can't do anything about it. That scares the shit out of the government at the time. And so they say, "Listen, you give us what we want and we'll give you something." Now you've got a little alien technology. Now you're talking to somebody from somewhere else and you have open communication. And if I'm thinking like a war general, my next question is, how do we kill it? If we had to fight it and it was able to just come here and do this and talk to us and they're around, what if we ever had to face them? Well, I'm not sure that you would activate that right now, because then it's discoverable. Then it has a location. But if you know you needed to do it, maybe you could get people mentally trained, not physically, prepared for this, and they would be waiting for a cue to do something that needed done at the time. I have to consider it.
I've got different perspectives on this question, and that is, do you believe that these programs are still in operation? I've heard that some people say that they are not, that they've already served the purpose, and it's now about implementing the people who are in the programs, and some believe that it's still going on, but just in different ways. They have different types of technology. They don't need the children to be physically there anymore. They can enter their mind in their dreams and activate this stuff. What do you think?
Yes, I believe it's still going on, because why wouldn't it be? Okay, let's be honest. The government tries to soak up everybody they can. Everybody that would be a usable asset, of course they want. Why wouldn't you? The elites consider us a bunch of eaters and breeders. So if there's any bright ones out there, these are going to be house workers. And so here's the way I see it. If it was running in the 60s and it was running when I was in it in the 80s, I would say, yes, of course it's going on. But here's what I think it really is. If they're not going to work for us, we don't want them to be a problem. You want to identify everybody. And I personally think we're managed like stock, as vulgar as that is. So they want to know what serial number could benefit them in what way, but also who would be a problem. If you're not an asset and you're really smart, you might compete with us. You might discover plans. They want to know people's morality and values as well, because what if you do work for our team, but you got a problem with what we're doing and you divulge information? So I think that what we have going on with countries is essentially a mob war to hold power. And different countries are different mobs, and some of them look like enemies and aren't. And they need to know who would be capable of making a difference or swaying opinions. And I think that ties right into the program, because in the paperwork it said that we would have to be on computers and then we would make memes. We would be meme wizards is what it said. Okay, I was in poor neighborhoods my whole life. Only my dad worked. We never had new cars. But when I'm 7 years old, I get a home computer and a programming book, and I'm coding.
Wow.
When I turned 14, my dad I had furniture with no legs on the chairs, and this guy buys me a full workstation, top of the line new computer again. And right now today, if you go look at my Facebook, there's no pictures of me. There's no pictures of my family, my cats, what I ate for lunch, none of that. There's like 500 pieces of detailed art that's anti-establishment, anti-pharma, anti-big government, and has messages I felt were channeled through me about AI, technology, and wake up. It's pretty strange, man, that it fits this narrative that they wrote in the 70s, and it continues to make me feel like my life is scripted.
Yeah, this is so interesting, man. I've got one more question for you before we close out. It's a very strange question, but do you often notice sequential numbers on a clock at specific times?
Absolutely. It's only started occurring to me.
Yeah.
And I noticed it because I was in church for 5 years as a Christian believer, and I'm out now, if I could state it that way. But someone told me the Bible was so beautiful because it was so immaculately written, and that's why gematria is important. So I studied the Hebrew language, and it's strange for me because my name in the gematria calculator, in English gematria, my family was knighted in England. That was the heraldry. My name is 888. I was born at 8 a.m. during an eclipse. There's 3 8s following me around everywhere in my life, and all of a sudden I noticed every 333, every 444, right on my clock all the time, as though what I'm doing at that moment is at the correct marker on a path. Yes, go this way.
Yes, 100%, man. I get the same thing with ones and twos. It's very interesting.
All right.
So if you have eyes to see, there seems to be this mystical connection to everything and everyone, that this existence is more scripted in a way than we would actually like to believe. I believe we do have free will, but like I was saying earlier, I think there is a greater force that can tap in to certain people at certain times and possibly sway a decision or change the overall direction of that person's life, maybe for the better, maybe for a greater good, who knows? But this is definitely fascinating, man.
Yeah, it's running deep in my life right now, and I know you want to wrap up, so maybe I could rapid fire
Go
just a
for it,
couple of
man.
show and
Yeah, you're
tells that
good. You got time.
I think really I'll keep this quick. But first of all, I actually somehow came into having all my report cards, and I imagine you guys can't really read this too well, but if anybody was to look at that,
Yeah, I
it
can see it
says
up
gate
close.
program.
Yeah.
Gate.
Yeah.
And I only say that because I imagine that people are clout chasing online or
Mm-hmm.
something. But here is from McKinley School when they said I was going to change
Mm-hmm.
classrooms and that I was going to be in this special tested program. And here's where it gets weird. They just kept testing us for everything. Bro, I always got D's in math. I was 98th percentile in most things. It wasn't math. They put me on the math team, chess club. They had us after school program fitness. They made us presidential award all the fitness. And what's really strange is that now today, if you went and looked at my artwork, you might call them political cartoons. And what's really weird is the first time I remember being in the school paper in second grade, I drew a political cartoon about the president. So it's very strange that everything I put up now is anti-war. And see, the other thing is that later in school, in like second grade, they made us play all the time in the computer lab. And I say play because it sounded fun to kids. But part of this conspiracy with the GATE program ties into that game, Oregon Trail. And my school taught a lot of
Yes,
Oregon
dude, I remember
Trail
the Oregon
to
Trail.
our classes. Think about it. You died of dysentery, first grader. What this is, it's resource management and it's bravery testing in a time of limited resources, right? And so they had us write a bound book journal in like first grade about how we would survive on the Oregon Trail.
No shit.
And then it's weird because I get a tattoo years later, and I'm not big on words. My tattoo artist fills a space by putting survivor on my arm. I didn't like have cancer or anything.
Wow.
So then it's really wild, bro, because when I get into college and I start designing, my line that they just called me and said, can we basically put it in the mall for you, came from a guy I had done a very specific logo for. I found that logo that I based mine on in a printed book in the Huntington Library. And now today, this flag I have hanging up, I see every day on the news because it's the Iranian flag center logo, that red mark in the center. My college design was based on it. A clothing line I did was called Genetics. Now all we hear about every day is RNA. My line that went into the mall was called Carbon 14. That's a very specific type of carbon we use for carbon dating. And I think we're finding out our whole timeline is a complete farce, a total lie. So then, to finish up my show and tell, I began in church a project called the Soldier Project. I work with a girl that I won't tell her story because it's grotesque what was done to her. But out of her story, I end up making rubber bracelets. And the first thing they say is soldier, and I spell it SOUL. This isn't a plug. It has I am right on it, just like source. And then later in my artwork, I start making pieces I'm given, and they say, I am, and you'll see them. Look at her tagline I borrowed. I was built for this war. I wasn't in the military. I'm not some gung-ho guy. I've been wearing a bracelet that says soldier under a flag that says soldier with a skull and crossbones on it that contains an X, down with all crowns. This is memento mori. And then that turns out to be the Skull and Bones actual motto. I didn't know that. I didn't look into spooky stuff. This is from my college days. So my artwork, my companies I formed seem to tie into this narrative, even to the point that I've been lugging a classic car around for 25 years called a Nova. And soon, right now, anytime, there's about to be the first for many lifetimes and many more to come. We're going to see a Nova in the sky. And the last time it happened was the Carrington event. The Carrington event that wiped out all the telegraph cables on Earth. The History Channel's been saying if we ever have another Carrington event, it'll be a lights out blackout.
Wow.
It seems to all be connected, and here's the last part of it. So when I'm a kid, the dream about the frogs. Frogs are reptiles, or they look like them. Maybe I have that wrong scientifically, but in that realm, I become, as a kid, a fan of Ninja Turtles. And you think, well, so what? Well, I have a 4-foot Michelangelo statue in my studio that was a fun gag on my podcast. You're going to see where this is going. When I was a little kid, there was a painting of St. Michael watching over me, and tapes were played for me at night, repetitiously. I don't remember what was on the tapes. I remember some classic music. I remember some 50s music. But later in my adult life, as I'm doing other things, I get gifts for our shows. I buy jewelry. I end up with 4 pieces of jewelry given to me. One of them, St. Michael. One of them is the symmetrical cross that turns out to be St. Michael's cross, St. Michael's sigil. I'm not only wearing these. The first thing that I was obsessed with as a kid was Voltron. And that symmetrical cross is right on his chest. I'm sitting next to a giant, expensive Voltron also. And St. Michael, my Ninja Turtle, is Mikey. It's Michelangelo. And then I go pull this necklace out of my box. These are all unrelated pieces. Are you kidding me? There's the same exact piece I didn't even realize was on my ring. It's the cross on Voltron. It's St. Michael. And I got a 4-foot Mikey statue watching over me.
Yes, dude.
Maybe I'm just putting meaning where there isn't any. But after what I've experienced lately with the contacts and the single vision I've had, I'm starting to feel like something somewhere else wants to talk to us, and we have to let that in.
Dude, I have to consider everything because our reality is obviously so much more than we could ever imagine. And I think that's starting to present itself to us. As we become aware, our perceptions are opening a little. And there are some folks like yourself who are starting to have memories that connect a lot of strange childhood events to a bigger picture of what's unfolding right now. So this is fascinating. Brandon, before you go, I hope this encourages other people who are in similar programs, having similar memories, to start talking about it, to start presenting the information, and I'm sure they'll want to learn more about you. So where can they do so?
So if you want to check out my artwork, it's under Brandon Barnett. That's Barnett. And that's on Facebook. My hashtag is human rights artist. Hashtag human rights artist, links to all my artwork. Since we're wrapping up, I won't go into anything, but I will tell you there's some music in there. I've never participated in music in my life. And if you believe in this experience of being handed something, I wrote a 60-poem album with music on my lunch breaks and put it out on SoundCloud. It was a wild experience for me. So I'm not trying to get people to listen to my music. I'm telling you, this was just a moment for me. Something was handed to me artistically that helped me learn about myself, and it's wild it exists. So you could check out my art. You could check out my music, and we used to do some shows you'll find on YouTube. I sent you my links if you want to post them, Chris.
Have those in the description.
And people are welcome to email me if they want to, man. So you can put that in the link.
Awesome, Brandon. Thank you so much. I'd love to get back with you in the future. There's a lot more we can definitely get into. And until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. See y'all then.